What is going on, Secondhand Talent family? It's your boy Steiner here with another episode of Secondhand Talent with artist Matt Leunig. Matt, welcome to the show.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me.
Well, it is a pleasure to have you on. And folks, if you're listening and not watching on YouTube, first of all, go over and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Give us a like. It really helps out. And I've got a little something to say here about our friend Matt, who started Scrape Knee, which was originally the name of a series of zines and comic books created in 2000, in the early 2000s, excuse me, and in 2006 eventually became the name of the overall studio. Early on, work consisted mostly of screen printed gig posters for touring bands and comic books, but has since grown into all fields of illustration. His work has appeared in numerous publications, video games, music videos, art galleries, and more. After a transient childhood overseas, growing up in the Middle East and Greece, Matt landed in the Bay Area and spent 8 years working in the video game industry while illustrating on the side. Grape Knee became a full-time studio in 2010, and with the freedom of working from anywhere came the ability to uproot and travel. After a brief 3-year stint in India and Washington, D.C., the studio couldn't help itself and had to return to the Bay Area, where it blossomed for 5 years in Oakland, California. As the studio grew, so did his family, and seeking a change of pace and space, the studio moved to the Dirty South in 2018. Matt has done rock poster work for bands such as String Cheese Incident, Ween, Widespread Panic, Billy Strings, The Dirty Heads, Eric Church, Dark Star Orchestra, Queens of the Stone Age, Pixies, 420 Fest, Sweetwater Does, and oh yeah, the rock poster show TRPS. Scrape Knee is currently a proud Atlanta, Georgia business. Folks, let's welcome Matt to the show.
Hello. Thank you. So weird hearing my own bio.
So weird grabbing the notes after I throw them. I don't know why I do that. Like, that seems so absurd. But Matt, welcome to the show. It's such a pleasure to have you on. As I was saying to you before, one of the best parts about this show for me is, getting to meet folks like you whose work I've admired for quite some time and to get to talk a little bit about it. So thank you for taking the time to spend with us. Now,
Sure, sure. I mean, I'm happy to talk posters and art any day. Being an artist, you're kind of sitting around by yourself a lot, so you grasp any chance of a little human interaction during the day. So I'll take it.
well, I'm certainly glad you grasped this straw right here. And now we start each interview out with one question.
Sure.
And folks, Matt hasn't seen the show, so he doesn't know the question, which is in season four, as we've established as we've gone through this season, it has been getting harder and harder to ask this question. So I am incredibly happy
Uh,
that I get to ask it. Matt, when I first reached out to you and said, "Hey, I've got a podcast called Secondhand Talent, and
uh-huh.
I'd like you to be on it." When
Sure.
you heard the name Secondhand Talent, what was the first reaction? What did you first think of?
Secondhand talent. I feel like I'd come across like podcasts that were all about like second jobs, almost like your people who have day jobs and then your second job is your passion job. So initially I thought it was something like that. But yeah, I don't know. I have no idea.
Well, the beautiful part about this question is that we get a different answer every time. And now, at the time of this taping, some 70 interviews in, I've never gotten the same answer twice.
Yeah.
And that then we can add another unique one to the books.
Yeah. If I
The,
had a little bit more time to ponder on it, I'd come up with a well articulated, intelligent answer for you.
I resemble that remark. So I'll put that out there. Now, listen, we listed a whole lot of work that you've done in that intro there. And before we get into even Scrape Knee, just very briefly, I'm very curious to hear, when did you realize, hey, I kind of have an aptitude for art, or I really enjoy this, and this is not even something I might want to do as a career, but something that, I can do.
I always drew as a kid. Um, it was kind of my little, I grew up being into comic books and like everybody, like cartoons. And um, I think what I found um, art gave me was kind of an escape. And almost more specifically, like, I don't know, my parents would have like dinner parties or we'd go out and like I didn't really want to interact with anybody. And it was a very, as a kid, it was like a socially acceptable way of being left alone. Like they were kind of like, oh, don't bother him. He's drawing. And you're like, you know. And then over time you realize like, yeah, I'm kind of good at this. And like you kind of find other art. I was never, I tried my hand at playing music and I never got anywhere with it. So I kind of found my lane and just kind of stuck with it.
Well, that was going to be my next question was, had you dabbled in music and knowing now that, yeah, I'm of a similar, I again resemble that remark. I couldn't play, so I became a comedian, much in the same vein of those who can't do teach, and which I also do. But that notwithstanding, I'm curious to know if, so you started out with a series of zines and comics.
Yeah.
How did Scrape Knee come about? Where did that?
Um, it's funny. I was thinking about like when I first started doing posters, but I was always doing flyers and stuff for my friends' bands or just like shitty bands in the neighborhood. And I was doing it in college. Um, and like I always kind of did little comic strips and stuff like that. But after college, I moved out to San Francisco in like 2001. And I don't know, I was dabbling in everything. For a second, I thought I was going to do animation. And I like interned at an animation studio until I realized, oh, I'm drawing like a million little drawings.
Yeah,
And I was like, I don't want to do that.
yeah,
Um,
a million little things that are slightly different each.
yeah. And I was like,
Yeah,
I'd rather spend all my time on one drawing. But yeah, the comics kind of were always there. And for a good, I don't know, 5 years, 6 years, I was kind of in the little indie comic scene in San Francisco, making little comics and Xeroxed zines and stuff like that. And would do kind of the conventions there, alternative press stuff. And I was like, I was trying to remember when it flipped that I started reaching out to do posters. But um, yeah, I mean, I think comics, they're a lot of work. Um, and
you
like,
know,
looking back now, like you'll see like a 30-page comic book and it's $4. And the amount of work that went into drawing that thing is pretty insane. So,
one of the craziest things for me, sorry, just to
yeah,
interject there for just a moment. I'm a huge comic book fan. I absolutely love comic books. Uh, Escapism, surrealism, art that I wasn't getting from any other source. I mean, it provided so many things for me that I wasn't getting from any other
yeah,
form of entertainment or literature because yeah, there were cartoons, but I couldn't hold like on TV, but I couldn't hold that in my hand,
yeah,
and I felt a difference with that. And you know, I think it's, kind of cool coming from that comic book space because it's very similar to the vein of secondhand talent, than that people don't realize how many people and how much work is involved in a single live show, let alone a festival.
yeah,
And with comic books, as you were alluding to, you have your inkers, you have your pencilers, your letterers, your drawers, your panelers, your arrangers. There are
yeah,
I mean, not forget about publishing. I mean,
yeah,
there's just in building a single panel, you have at least half a dozen people involved every time. And that is something that the person who, when you mentioned, several dollars for a comic book, one of my prized possessions is, issue one of the original Sandman. And, it was 25 cents,
yeah,
at the time. And that blows my like.
I mean, I think comics were like $1.25 when I was like in
Yeah,
middle school, and then you'd see it go up to $1.75, and you'd be like, "What is like? How dare they?" And now thinking back, you're like, "Oh wow, that's
we weren't paying enough. Yeah.
yeah." I mean, I didn't even know. I would assume comics are probably what, $4 now.
Comics range anywhere. I think like the 3.99 to 7.99 range now. I mean, depending on how it's printed and how many pages, but I think a lot more often we're seeing like one shots
Yeah,
are being heavily relied upon, less so as like I think of like it was late 80s or early 90s Green Lantern one shot that was like kind of almost hardbound,
yeah,
like Ganthet's Tale, and they don't do them like that anymore.
yeah,
And it's kind of like, they're not as hefty as they were when we were
yeah,
getting them.
yeah. It's funny. My studio is right next to this really cool comic spot. It's this old Irish pub that they turned into a comic book shop slash pub slash pinball museum. Shout out my parents' basement. But I barely buy new comics these days. But I'm a sucker for finding old like Hulk comics from like the 70s, and just
Oh
like
yeah.
there's a look and a feel, and just the way the color's done, and the half toning and stuff that like I'm so drawn to.
Tarantino made it the name of his film, but it's really what it was, Pulp Fiction, and
Mhm.
it's true in its truest form, to really feel that paper. That's the biggest difference. This like laminated high gloss shit that
Yeah.
comes out these
What's the
days. Like,
coloring like when it got too nice?
yeah,
It's the same with posters. It's like I'd rather see like an offset poster where the coloring is not trapped very well, as opposed to a perfect digital print.
it's our flaws
Yeah.
that really make us who we are. And I mean, again, kind of looping us back in, a scraped knee is a flaw, but it's a temporary one.
Yeah.
Just kind of curious again, where that title, kind of came
I
from.
don't even know. I wish I had a cool story behind it. I was trying to think of, at the time I was like, I don't want to just be Matt Leunig. Everybody had a cool studio name, and I was like, I came up with the stupidest things. Um, but yeah, Scrape Knee just kind of felt gritty and like, you know, hand done, and I don't know, it kind of fit the vibe. Everybody thought I was like some kind of skateboarding reference. I sucked at skateboarding. I just, I would rather look at the bottom of a skateboard than get on one. But I don't know. It's a cool name, and it stuck. And it's that weird thing where, throughout my whole career, it's like even for doing shows, like, do I go under Scrape Knee? Do I go under Matt Leunig?
Mm.
Do I go under the long ass title like Scrape Knee, the art of Matt Leunig? And at this point, I just go under Matt Leunig, and Scrape Knee's kind of a thing that it's associated with. Um, Maybe I'll do some Scrape Knee specific shirts and stuff like that. But
I mean, I took it the way I interpreted it. I asked the secondhand talent question every time, but I never, really give feedback back on other people's projects. But I actually really appreciate the term scrape knee because it gives me major Chumbawamba vibes. Major tub thumping. I get knocked down, but I get back up again. You're never going to keep me down. And I feel
I'll
like,
take it.
well, I think about last season, I forget exactly which episode. Go check it out. I interviewed Mark Serlo. And, you know, he paraphrasing him, he told a story about getting some advice from, Jeff Koons and Lindsey Buckingham, who were his heroes, and, you know, them kind of letting him know, like, you gotta have something else to do, like this isn't going to be everything. Just kind of like telling him, like hedge your bets, make sure you've got stability, continue to pursue what you're doing, pursue your passion, but also, maintain that level head because you will get knocked down and you're going to need to get back up again.
Yeah.
And, you're there's going to be, obstacles in the path. No, 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 not paraphrasing anymore now, going back to just me, but like there's obstacles in every creative person's path, in everybody's path, but in the path of creativity, certainly.
Yeah.
And, you know, we mentioned, like I said in the beginning, you moving around a lot, growing up outside of the US and then coming here. And, it is really kind of, to me anyway, from the outside looking in, really, just a series of, knockdown and getting back up again. And, you know, every time I get back up, I just try to do a little bit better than the time I got knocked down before.
Yeah, I mean that's the whole grind of starting any profession, especially specifically when it's like a solo whether it be stand up, whether it be writing, doing posters, when you're the only one in charge of where you're going to go, um, you get your ass kicked a lot in the beginning. And if you stick around, um, good things will happen.
So, real quickly before we move kind of into like the present day, I'm very curious. Now, being in the Bay Area, why India or
Oh,
and Washington, D.C.? Where did those two happen along the way in between?
um, I had I had just kind of started dating my now wife, and she had moved in together. And I was working. This is before I was doing Scrape Knee full time.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Wow.
so I started doing Scrape Knee full time in 2010, and kind of like when I moved, essentially. So I used to work in video games, um, and nothing fun, like nothing artistic. I was a producer in video games, for Ubisoft, and like used to make
Hmm.
like Ninja
Oh,
Turtle
okay.
games and stuff like that. And I've been there a while and kind of was getting burnt out. And then just by chance, she wanted to travel, and we were trying to think of other things to do. And then my whole department got let go. So we were just kind of like, hey, this is a great opportunity. And then her job, she used to work at this nonprofit. They offered her a job in Delhi.
Oh, wow.
So I was like,
Perfect.
let's do it. Let's go. So we went for 6 months, and I thought I was just going to chill. And I was like, I'm going to find Indian sign painters and like get into that. Like, the people that would do hand done
Yeah,
movie
yeah.
posters. And then like the second day I was there, I was really bored. And I found like Indian Craigslist, and somebody was like looking for an illustrator.
Ah!
And I was like, oh, cool. So I just like wrote them back, and they said, meet me. They wrote me back, and they're like, meet me here. And I went, and it was like an empty mall, and it was Virgin.
Famous last words.
Yeah, I
Jesus.
know. But it was like Virgin Mobile, and they were like, you do art for like us for the next couple months. And I was like, cool, okay. But then they were like, you're in charge of like 15 people. And I was like, what? What? So I had this kind of crazy experience where I was just working in this empty mall with 15 people drawing kind of whatever I wanted, and they were using it for like mobile ads.
That almost sounds like a Black Mirror episode. Like
I know,
that
it was
just
really
like
weird.
I'm working in an empty mall in India with
I'd take a
15
I'd take a
people. Like
45-minute rickshaw ride to work.
oh,
It was trippy. I mean, I stuck out like a sore thumb, but it was after 6 months we were ready to come back.
and why DC?
DC, I went to school in Virginia, in like James Madison, and my wife, we were still kind of like in this thing where we're like, do we want to go back to California? I had been out there for 10 years or something at that point, and she ended up going to grad school in DC for 2 years.
Okay.
But what that kind of afforded me, this whole kind of India, I had a little stint in Atlanta, was I was living in these relatively cheap areas. So I was able to kind of get the scrape knee thing going full time. um, and get that. So when I did eventually move back to California, it was already moving, and then I didn't have to really struggle too much. Um,
So when you say moving, like what were the what like what are
I
some
had
of those things?
clients, I had,
Yeah, like
bands, I had gigs, I had jobs lined up. I had
how did that come about after? Well, so this is what I guess what I'm asking is like, so we've got this period until about 2010 where you uproot and go to India.
yeah.
Were the clients there prior, or did you start
Yeah,
establishing?
so I was always kind of doing poster work. Um, Even when I was working at the video game company, I was kind of doing these two full-time jobs where I was working
Mm,
there during the day, and at night I was just kind of, I'd
okay.
slowly started doing posters in the Bay Area with the Fillmore. Um, I had this like really lucky interaction where I met somebody who was working with Widespread Panic back in like 2007, and kind of started doing stuff with them. There was this really cool. I used to live in like Haight Ashbury area, and there was this great framing shop called Off the Wall that like it was
Oh
basically
yeah.
concert posters, and like they would always have these kind of gatherings, and even like starting out, like I met a lot of people in the kind of scene that were there early on. Mark Spusta and Chuck Sperry, they're all kind of like local dudes, and like we both kind of we were getting opportunities with Widespread, or I used to just reach out to local venues and be like, hey, can I do this show? And back then, you know you could, they'd just be like, it's not up to me, and they'd give you the manager's email, if you were lucky.
So it was a real what I'm hearing. And shout out Mark. You know,
Amazing.
we've got our little Bliss Bug statue
Yeah,
here. You
he's
know,
amazing.
his shirts are the only ones I wear on the show, and I really wanted to wear this one today, inspired by life, because that's how I feel about, that sphere of art that you're talking about, and these people. It really is just, inspiration, but kind of you know, building right off of that tenacity to be like, you know what, I'm gonna just reach out and go and get it. If you don't ask, you don't get. And to be willing to hear a no and just
Yeah.
continue to shoot your shot, you know, there's something to be said for that level of analog tenacity that doesn't really exist in the world today.
Yeah, I mean, the early shows too were brutal because the deal was like I would sell I'd sit at the merch table too. Like I'd pay for
Mm,
pretty much all of it, sit at the merch table, uh, sell what I could. Most of the time it was not what I expected. Give the
yeah.
band a slew, and then you kind of hope you made your money back.
Yeah,
Um,
right. So you're putting up a bunch of the upfront cost and just
yeah.
kind of hoping.
Yeah. But over time, that person or their management's like, hey, that's the Bay Area guy. And like, hey, we're coming in town. You want to do another poster?
You
Or, hey, we
start as
manage this other band. You want to give them a shot?
once you start establishing that pattern of
Yeah.
reliability, that's when everything continues to fall
Yeah.
into place.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, you're watching your friends kind of go out at night, and you're like, I got a poster to finish. And you
But
got to be
that's
okay with that.
commitment. It's what it takes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the cool thing about San Francisco, I mean, is the history of doing posters there.
Mm,
That was something that was pretty well established before I got there. So when I started, it was a really weird time. Um, Looking back, like if I started in any other city, I don't think I would have been able to do it. I could approach venues and tell them what I wanted to do, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, we know what you're talking about." Or bands knew, a lot of bands were doing posters over there, and it's not like how it is now, where every band has concert posters, and people kind of understand the value of it now. You were doing a lot of explaining to people back then. Why would I spend all this money on like this kind of print when I can just do a digital print or whatever? Um, but San Francisco kind of always had that history from the '60s, and kind of was pretty respected. You'd see concert posters on the walls of every venue, record shop, restaurant, so people were kind of still into it. Um, and so it was a little easier. Like I couldn't imagine trying to do that in Atlanta or, in 2006. Like it would have been tough. But people do it, but it was a path that had a little less resistance.
Yeah, it really reminds me, it's really quite reminiscent of a lot of the stuff that Justin Hampton had to say about, being in like the Seattle area in the 90s,
Yeah.
if you like you had to have been there,
Yeah.
in order for that, like, in order for those dominoes to kind of fall. And of course, that is, the own personal investment and sweat equity notwithstanding, but like circumstances and the scene that's around you is absolutely a huge impact on,
Sure.
the growth and success.
For sure. I
Speaking of,
mean, sorry to interrupt, like
no,
whenever
go ahead.
somebody asks me, how do I get into posters? It's such like a personal question.
Mm.
I'm usually like, well, you moved to San Francisco in 2001, and then you talked to, Ramona Downey, who was running booking at Bottom of the Hill, and she'll get you email for, this band's management. And there's other, obviously more universal things I can say, but it really is like, a path that is hard to recreate. It's of the time. People have their own, like I wouldn't, the way somebody gets into doing posters now. Some people are coming out of school where gig posters are being taught, and like, I don't know. It's like everybody's got their own little personal path, but that was mine in San Francisco.
Similar but different analogy. One of the most common remarks I get when I let people know that I do stand up is, "Oh, I've always wanted to do stand up comedy." And the biggest contrast between the two, and I was thinking of this as you were saying that, is that, you know, my response to those people is pretty uniform, which is
Yeah,
find an open mic and go try it out.
yeah,
And, you know, you were fortunate, to be in a time and context and circumstances which allowed you to take your ability and flourish it in ways that, you can't just necessarily, like, there is no open mic for poster artists. You know
yeah.
what I mean? It's a much more delicate,
That said,
unique
it's like
journey.
now social media is accessible. So
Mm.
now you can put a poster up and, hopefully, get a ton of eyeballs on it like immediately. Um, and we had our little our gigposters.com forum where all the poster trolls, we'd all kind of, trade stories and bullshit each other. But yeah, now, I mean, so on the flip side, it's like, like now there's social media. Now people can kind of like get jobs just by posting stuff on Instagram. They get their first poster gig, creating, mock-up posters, or it's like opportunities are completely different, but are, um, it's something that, I still like. I can't imagine doing it any different. It would have been nice to, to have like social media in some ways, but and just, not feeling, like I said, so San Francisco, there was a community, but like that's kind of what social media is now. It's the community. So like you could be in a small town and still kind of get this thing going. Um,
And clear this up for me now on the theme of community. There's this little thing called TRPS for those who aren't
mhm.
familiar, the Rock Poster Society. Can you tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about what that is?
So rock it
Or the
trips.
Rock Poster Show? The Rock Poster.
Yeah. So well, yeah. So the rock poster show, basically, everybody just called it trips. It works pretty well. But it's this community, or it's an organization out of San Francisco. They've been around for, I'm gonna get shit for this, but 25 years. I should know this. Um,
Comment if you actually know.
I know I'm gonna get in trouble.
Uh-uh.
But they've been putting on a show that, celebrates kind of concert posters, and kind of what makes them different is they also kind of are they basically are a nonprofit that helps fund concert poster artists that are in trouble, whether it be, you know, a lot of the difference with Trips is it represents a lot of the old 60s as well. So a lot of these artists are getting up there in age and, you know, may not have had the benefits of having their the rights to their artwork and making a lot of money, or like they're coming across health issues that they need help with. Well, sometimes they use the funds for certain legal issues that help artists. But anyways, they're mainly known because of this show they do every year, and it's in Golden Gate Park. And it's this beautiful mix of the old 60s artists like Stanley Mouse and, you know, Lee Conklin, who did the Santana Lion cover, and a lot of these guys who are responsible for the whole psychedelic 60s scene. And then newer artists like myself. And again, another lucky thing of me living in San Francisco, I've been doing this show since like 2007.
Yeah.
And after moving from the Bay Area about 5 years ago, I've been lucky to kind of bring a little part of that with me and start an Atlanta Trips poster show. So we're started to do that, and now there's one in Denver, and we're franchising, baby.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you did the most recent official poster for the Trips Atlanta
I did,
show.
yeah,
And I think it's such a great thing. We have like like a real like microcosm of that, I think, in the fan art shows that we see like on Fish Tour and on Dead and Company Tour and places like that. But I
actually,
think of
sorry, last year's correction, so I don't get shit from other posters. Jeff Wood did one. I The beauty with the Trips shows is like anybody can do a poster, but there's always an official one. And last year, I'm mixing all the shows up. We had Jeff Wood do the official one.
Jeff, my sincere apologies for getting that one wrong. I,
I want to make sure that he comes back, so I got to give
I,
him his
I
credit.
want that on there. By the way, Jeff, you've been doing incredible work with John and Heinz over with Big Old Nasty Get Down. I've been
Oh
loving
yeah,
seeing the stuff
John.
you've been doing with him. John, friend of the show, season 2 interview. Check him out.
Nice. I did a
But
little work with John.
yeah, yeah. I mean, what a guy! Shout out John. Shout out Big Old Nasty Get Down, doing some awesome things with music and art, and really trying to bring artists in. And he's also worked with our friend Mark Spusta,
Mhm.
on the which was it? I forget which single it was. We did like the 2 7-inch prints
Yeah,
with it
done
and
a
a
lot
couple of
with
stickers.
Jim Mazza too. Yeah,
Absolutely. And it's so great, because we look at kind of like the toys in front of us by our friends, Jermaine Rogers, Mark Spusta, and our late, departed friend,
yeah,
Frank Kozik. Um, I think of Designer Con, right?
yeah,
And it's this massive show where all of these wonderful artists, my friend Luke Chu represented in the corner over there, get together and get to show off the toys.
yeah,
And to know not only that there's one for rock posters, but that it has a it has such a great mission
yeah.
is really, I mean, it must I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it must feel pretty gratifying to be able to kind of start to spread that from the roots in California, nationally.
No, I mean, I was, it's helped my career. It's helped me, just personally. It's such an amazing group of people, and the people that put it on, a lot of them are volunteers. They've been doing this for years, and like, I mean, it's the only show you get fed. People are making chili in the back and sandwiches, and like,
Wow.
it feels very, I don't know. Everybody, it feels very cozy and friendly. Um, Everybody kind of is supporting each other, and I don't know. It's good vibes.
It
It's
sounds like
and,
sounds like
and
well, sorry, I was just gonna say it sounds like Trips has a great secondhand talent community. I'd love to talk to someone from them. I mean, it's a
oh,
beautiful thing.
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, like one of the biggest, one of the things that you said that I love the most was newer artists that are coming up, and that it's a mix of all these generations.
Yeah,
Because one of the biggest messages of this show for me is conveying the understanding that the love for the music, the art, for what we do didn't start with us.
yeah,
And I kind of see it, as our role as artists in whatever capacity to continue to pass that torch down, to the next generation and incorporating them into these,
yeah.
I would say in the scene historic events is a beautiful thing.
I mean, that's what we're hoping to do with the Atlanta show because the trip scene in San Francisco is well established and has been there forever. And there's other poster shows obviously around the country, but like the kind of southeast coast has a ton of poster artists that never would go to California, whether it be in North Carolina or Florida. And, a lot of the times, like the very first Trips show, we had a friend of your pod, Caleb Williams,
Caleb Williamson, I was just gonna say,
and
yeah,
Derek
absolutely.
Perez, and all these like awesome poster artists, and they'd never done a poster show before. It was their first show. Um, just out
Wow.
of opportunity so that's kind of like what I'm hoping to do with this Atlanta show is we want to bring in heavy hitters so that people will come out and all that, but like obviously get local talent who are just starting off in posters and giving them their first opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. And people ask me a lot if I try if my focus is mostly on people in Chicago. And no, it's not because, people from our scene are represented. Yes, I could find someone who works in every slice of the industry in the scene here.
Yeah,
But uh, part of the message that, again, that we're trying to convey is the understanding that there are all of these people all over the country, the unsung heroes of our industry, the secondhand talent, so to speak, or who this is for. It's not just to shine a spotlight on the guests that we have on the show, but all the people who occupy those spaces in the industry.
yeah,
And, to just kind of spread that message of like, like you were saying before about how Trips kind of embodies that essence of the 60s of just like kind and
yeah,
understanding that there's so much work going into you having a good time.
yeah. I mean, and, their thing is like preserving and commemorating that stuff, and taking care of like the people involved. And like I said, these are not millionaires given these are regular people volunteering, that they themselves have found this is their community. A lot of them are poster buyers, and came from that background.
It,
Um,
it's a beautiful thing. It's
yeah,
a
so
beautiful.
that kind of is like always what's differentiated that show to me from any other show. I know, like I think that's the only show that Mark does. Emic was that was kind of the one of the only shows that Emic was doing for a long time. There's just like a history there, um, and people respect it, and like I'm looking forward to seeing what we can like I said, there's a Denver one now, and like getting artists in these kind of underrepresented. I mean, art, as far as a poster show, giving them a place to go, um, and getting their stuff seen, and I
Well,
think
yeah,
it's cool.
and it's been an absolute joy to highlight those artists on this show. Talking
Yeah.
about our friend Caleb Williamson, who else has been on the show? The names are all escaping me right now, but I do want to give specific shout outs to some of my friends in the Midwest here. Matt Crosher doing some awesome things with Crosher Designs, Jack Firestone. Party Time Designs, both doing some incredible work. Jack doing line of cut stuff. I mean,
Mhm.
just some really innovative things going on in the Midwest over here. And, you know, those are two folks in particular who I feel, like their work should be seen more. And that's kind of, the real goal here is let's get the word out about what's been going on, not what's new. Like
Yeah.
this is what's been happening.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's you're kind of doing a selfless thing. You're putting people, other artists and other creators, you're helping them kind of rise with doing these interviews, and get them more exposure and um you know what I mean?
Well, I appreciate that, but I truly believe though that it's about the whole thing. The rising tide lifts all ships, right? And it's
Yeah,
it's it's everybody working I can't tell you how many people who've been on this show because of somebody else who was on this show.
yeah.
And it just expanding laterally that way and continuing to blossom. And it's a beautiful thing to experience and to be a part of.
Yeah, I mean, the poster industry is pretty tricky, especially these, like, as more and more money gets kind of like involved in it, um,
Hmm.
certain parts of it splinter. And, as I always look at it, there's like the bands slash management, the artists, and the collectors, and they all got to be equally, in tune. As soon as one starts to pull too much one way, it starts to throw things off. And whether that be with um, people looking to make a lot more money, getting greedy, whether charging for stuff, selling stuff. Um, it's nice to see pockets like the Trip Show or this where people are supporting each other, as opposed to kind of, trying to screw each other over.
Yeah, unfortunately, when you give an inch, people tend to grab a mile.
Yeah,
And, when there's kind of a collective or shared understanding like there is with trips, where it's like, like as you mentioned, kind of like this, we're all in this together,
yeah,
then, that's certainly the ideal. But I mean, it's something we strive for, right?
yeah.
Um, I gotta ask, as we wind down this interview, you've worked with so many of my favorite bands that I listen to all the time. Notably Queens of the Stone Age and Ween. I'm curious, what are some of your favorite poster experiences that you've had?
Um, it's funny. That's a good question because it's usually like, what's your favorite poster? But like poster experience is also it's
No,
a
well, we could do both. We could do poster and poster experience, but I prefer poster experience. I kind of want to know because, like, it again, the rising tide,
yeah.
yeah.
I my I consider I was doing kind of poster work for a while before I did a screen print. I was doing like crappy digital flyers and stuff like that. So I always consider like my first screen print as like my official start date. And my first poster was a Ween poster.
Oh, no
Um,
way.
I was like, they're today still kind of one of my favorite bands. Um, and like, looking back, it's like very different than some of my style now. But like, um, I always kind of look back at that as my hallmark entry, and it started off as one of my favorite bands. So I got a little spoiled off the bat. Um, but as far as favorite poster experiences, it's usually like when I hear back that the band or the artist has something to say about it, they appreciate it, or like I did a poster for Ben Harper a long time ago, and through the grapevine, somebody told me that it was like in his kid's room, and you're like, oh, that's awesome. Or like seeing like there's a couple Ween things I did, and there were pictures of Diener with them, and I was like, oh, that's great.
That's got to be such a gratifying feeling, loving the music and then seeing the artist with your work, like, and
Well, because I'm usually not. Um, People always ask like, "Oh, do you get to hang out with the bands? Do you get to meet the bands?" In sometimes, but like I'm usually not into that. I like whether it be
is
my
it an
own like
is it
weird
an
social insecurities or whatnot. But like, I mean, I remember a Ween show. I did the poster. This was like 2013, And the manager afterwards was like, "Hey, man, um, if you want to say hi, they're on the bus after the show." And I was like, "Absolutely not." Because I was just like, "What?" I'm like two in my head. I was like, they just got done with the show. They're just like doing whatever they do. And
Yeah, you're thinking like an artist.
the last thing they want is like the guy who did the poster to go on and be like, "Hey guys, it's such an honor. Cool. So I'm like, I'll let I'll let the mystery remain. But looking back, I probably should have.
You know, it's so interesting to hear that take because I think right I think the average listener is gonna be like, how could you not take the opportunity? But I mean, for me, I was kind of wondering, and what I was starting to ask there was it coming from a place of maybe like ever meet your heroes, or was it just like more so just the artistic integrity of it?
Not even that. I think it is, don't meet your heroes. I had a couple experiences early on where I did get to meet some artists, musicians, and they weren't bad. They were just kind of like overblown. So like I did a poster and the management was like, "Oh, they want to meet you. They want to talk to you." And I was just like, "Ooh, hey, this is like my
Yeah.
early on." I was like, "Oh, I'm important." And like I was like, "This is gonna be great. We're gonna go backstage." And I get backstage and there's just like a line of people, and the guy in front of me, he's just like, I don't know. They said he liked my shoes and want to talk to me about my shoes, and like it was like this conveyor belt of you go up and you're just
What?
like, "Hello," and they're like, he did the poster, and he's just, "Oh, great, next," and
So
it
just
just felt,
anticlimactic as
it was
fuck.
like crushing, and
Oh,
um,
but
but
that's the thing is,
I think I like when it happens organically and you meet them at a
mm,
show or something like that. That's always great, you know.
I mean, I think organic is definitely the best way to go. Matt, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Anything coming up you want to talk about or let us know, or are we in a wait and see mode, or anything you want to leave us off with?
I've been I'm in uh, dad mode a little bit. I'm coming up on almost 20 years of doing posters. And
Wow.
I kind of slowed down a bit this summer. And, just in general, I've had fun doing some other illustration opportunities. That said, I just got back from trips this past weekend, so I'm jazzed to get some more gigs in the books. And for me right now, it's the next Atlanta show. So that's going to be, we do it every February. So starting to get that together and kind of put my energy into that. So
Outstanding. Well, folks, you can check out all of Matt's work, Scrape Knee, Trips, everything else. There's going to be links in the description of this episode. Check it all out. If you're in Atlanta or that area, go check out the show. I promise you, you will not be disappointed. It is going to be an awesome time. Matt, thank you so much again for being on the
thanks,
show. It was
Steiner.
really great having you on.
Absolutely, man. I enjoyed the conversation, and hit me up anytime.
Appreciate it, man. Well, this has been Steiner with another episode of Secondhand Talent, and we'll see you next Wednesday. And that's a podcast. There we go. We did it.
Beauty.
We did it.